Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Industry Night with me, Nycci Nellis, the show that takes you on a deep dive of the happenings in the hospitality industry. If you're new here, hi and welcome. And if you're old here, hi and welcome too. A little bit about me before I kick into the show. I have been covering the DC food, wine, and hospitality scene for the last 20 plus years. It all started with the list, areyouonit.com, the online e-zine that tells you everything happening in the DC metro area. You want to know about openings, you want to know about events, you want to know about all the things, it's all there. Of course, you tune into Foodie and the Beast every Sunday at 11 on 1500, DC's only food and wine variety show for the last 16 years. And you follow me at NYCCINELLIS on all the platforms, but especially Instagram, because I'm really using that one the most. And then we have this show, Industry Night. We've been around for almost 8 years now, and I get to do really cool things because I do residencies, and you get to watch on YouTube or you get to download on your favorite platforms for podcasts. So that sort of takes me to where I am. So I'm back in Delaplane. As you can see, I'm at the wine room here in Barrel Oak Winery and Brewery. And so last week I took a little tour of Culpeper. So I took a break from Barrel Oak and I went to Culpeper County. They brought me in for like both a media tour and also to do a show there. And oh my God, it was so cool. So check out my stories on Instagram because you will definitely see me at a bison farm. You will definitely see me talking about truffle hunting. You will definitely see me eating like a big old steak because they have this fabulous steakhouse called Piedmont there. The whole thing was really impressive. And I was also at Old House, which is a winery, a brewery, and a distillery. So you'll get to see all those things on Instagram and then come back here because in a couple weeks we'll have a show about all of that. And you know, one of the things I love most about living in the DC metro area is that we're so close to all these different experiences. So like if you're in the city or you're in the suburbs, it's really only a short drive and all of a sudden you're someplace totally different. Like here at Barrel Oak example. So, you know, it starts, I'm on a 4-lane highway and then I'm on a 2-lane highway. And then I'm on like a 1-lane road. And then I'm on this like gravel drive. Like everything gets greener and prettier. The sun shines a little brighter. You can actually hear the birds chirping. They're here with me. And that is an amazing thing that we have access to. And I love that I get that opportunity to do it because you need to regulate your blood pressure all the time. You cannot live in a go, go, go world 24/7. So I'm grateful to the team here, especially Adriana Luca for bringing me in. Okay, so let's talk about today's show. So I was doing some research and I had thought I met Danny Lee first, and I thought I met Scott Drewno second, but I'm totally wrong. So Danny Lee and his mom, Mama Lee, opened up Mandu right around the corner from my old apartment on 18th and T back in 2006. Now, David and I would go to Mandu quite often because we love authentic Korean food. But I don't think I really met Danny there. And then I think it was 2011, Danny and his mom opened up a second Mandu in what is now the Mt Vernon Triangle. I mean, they really kicked off that area because there was nothing there back then. And I was actually there for dinner with David Hagedorn and his husband, Michael Widomski. And that's where I met Danny Lee. So that's sort of where our friendship started. Now, Scott Drewno is a total other story. He came to town in 2007, and I remember it so clearly because Scott was opening up The Source with Wolfgang Puck. And he came to town about, 6 months before the Source opened. And he met with all the people in the food space, had coffee, had tea, had breakfast. I had dinner with Scott and I really got to know him and he really got to know me. And that boy sent a thank you note to me afterwards because his mama raised him right. And it just started off a beautiful friendship. And so when Scott opened up The Source, a Wolfgang Puck property, it was Scott Drewno's because everybody in the city knew Scott. So that's how we started. And I can't wait to get in with them because in 2017, the two of them created the Fried Rice Collective. And you know all their award-winning restaurants. You know the Chicos, all four of them. You know Anju, which just got a Rammy the other night. And the recently launched IEGU, which also turns out to be an event space in the evening called The Shell. Get it? IEGU and The Shell. Anyway, so we're going to find out how the two of them came together, created their partnership, and then launched this award-winning restaurant group. But first, I'm going to talk with Marie Levitt. So she grew up in the mountains, just northeast of France, and she is now the director of wholesale and outside sales here at Barrel Oak. And we're going to chat briefly about sort of the rise of Virginia wines and sort of, I love this, like the importance of seeing Virginia wines on the wine list in the restaurants you go to or when you go into a wine store, like what that value is. So let's start with Marie. Marie Levitt, thank you so much for joining me today in, what am I in? I'm in the Barrel Room?
You're in the winery.
Oh my God, I'm in the winery. It's so fantastic. So how does a young woman from France find herself in the Piedmont region,
Well,
the Italian region of Virginia?
Well, I think I get lost. No. So I moved in the US 12 years ago. I thought I would do a 9-month internship with a French linen company. It ended up being 9 years with those guys. Long story short, 9 years brings a lot of stuff to your life, right? Mm-hmm. So a husband, a house, and moving somewhere else because the city was nice for us, but we wanted more green. And coming from northeast of France, I kind of needed the mountain back. Mm-hmm. So we find that beautiful Shenandoah Valley here. And then I jumped on that other passion that I had for a long time, wine. Mm-hmm. And here somehow I ended up at Barrel Oak Winery.
Well, I'm sort of curious about, you know, given where you grew up, your knowledge of wine.
Yeah.
You know, some Europeans come here and are sort of like, sort of nose in the air about wines coming from the Virginia region. Yeah. How did you sort of educate yourself and learn about what was going on here at the winery?
Well, I've always been a big actor in supporting your community. Back in France or where I lived in Canada, I think the most important thing is enjoying what you have around instead of trying to look for stuff thousands of miles away, right?
What's in your backyard?
What's in your backyard. Mm-hmm. So I looked at Virginia wine, which evolved in a huge amount of
right.
The quality is not the same now, but it was like 15 years ago. And I came to a winery and discovered grapes that I've never heard of before. And right there, I was like, okay, why? I don't want to be cocky and say I know so much about wine being French, but you know probably more than other people, right? Mm-hmm. But I was like, why do I not know Sévard Blanc? Why do I not know Vidal? Why do I not? So I started to be intrigued about it, and then I was like, was it good, right? And the answer was yes. So I was kind of pissed at myself, but I didn't know about it.
Well, you can't know about everything, and you were in the linens world for a while.
That's true.
So, but you got into working with this winery here, and now you get the opportunity to share your knowledge about the wine program here. Yeah. And how do you do that? What's your story? Like when you're meeting with either a restaurant or somebody who has a wine room or something of that nature, or a hotel. How do you talk about not just the importance of Barrel Oak wine, but also the importance of Virginia wines, being local?
I mean, to your point with Barrel Oak cannot evolve by itself. It's Virginia growing together, right? So when you go to a restaurant, you go to a hotel, the first thing I do before talking to anyone is checking their wine list. Because, you go to California, you expect to see California wine on the list. You go to France, you expect to see French wine on the list.
Yes.
Italy, same way. You go to Virginia, one time out of two, you might have one Virginia wine, only one, and that's about it. And that bothers me a lot.
So it's really funny. There was a writer here in DC. He has since passed away, unfortunately, but Michael Bergenal. And in the aughts, he would say, everybody's talking about local. Everybody's talking about local. He's like, and then you look at their wine list, there's no local. Yeah. He was a real proponent of Virginia wine, real proponent of Virginia wine. So you're right. it doesn't have to be 100%.
No.
But we should be seeing more Virginia wines
Yeah, you
on the
should be
list.
seeing like a red and a white and at least a rosé, something different, you know. So that's how I approach people. I'm like, I can be sneaky and just come in and order a Virginia wine when I know they don't have it on the list.
Right.
And then I get to the manager and say, what a shame. But most of the time I just sit with them. And the best way to be able to put Virginia wine on the list is to have them try it, because most of people still think that Virginia wine is actually not good. And when I have customer try Barrel Oak wine, I give them a sip. And the first answer I have is, this is actually good. And I'm like, what do you mean actually?
Actually, maybe you should change the way you say that.
Yeah, but I mean, it is true that Virginia wine was not where it stands today. So it's kind of, we have to prove to people that we evolved a lot and now we're doing really stunning product. And you can't do that without having them taste it.
Sure.
So they're still a little bit like scared to put wine on the menu because they're scared that it's not going to move. But when they put it by the glass or when they offer a little sip of wine to the guest, 9 times out of 10, that guest will go for that wine.
Of course.
Because they are so surprised and so happily, you know, they're like, yeah, this is amazing. Well, Virginia wine does this. I'll take the glass, you know?
Right.
So it's kind of how it is. You kind of have to push it to them a little bit. And once they are sold, then they sold it better to the guests.
So now when you're coming in with Barrel Oak wines, which of the ones, how do you bring them in? How are you, because we have several here with us, but I know you have quite a few SKUs. So how do you, which ones are you liking these days and you're like, I like this for you? How do you go about doing that?
It actually, it's more like how do I go about the strategic point of it. If you go for a bottled wine, because you still want the wine to move on the list, if I go and bring a hybrid that nobody never heard of, it's not going to move, right? So if it's only going to be a wine list, I'm going to, stick to Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, names that are known, right? Now, if a restaurant is willing to put the wine by the glass, then I push them into stuff that they never heard of.
Sure.
Cévar Blanc is one of my most favorite of it. Vidal, and then maybe Traminet, who's a hybrid of Gewürztraminer, which is literally where I grew up.
Right, you came from.
So it depends on what they're going to do with it. Wine list, I will stick to the very well-known grapes. By the glass, I will go with something different so people can discover it. So that's kind of what I push.
Excellent. Okay, well, we love being out here.
Yeah.
So tell everybody, please, where we can find you, and if people want to talk to you more about the wines of Barrel Oak and also Virginia wines, because you're so knowledgeable, where can we find you and where can we find everybody here?
Well, you can mostly find me at Barrel Oak Winery, but we do Ask for Marie, I'm here. But we sell our wine in many different places. We sell in restaurant and hotels and country club, but in grocery stores as well. We do Wegmans, we do Total Wines, we do
you guys
Costco.
are really rad.
We have a lot of, places where
you're working hard.
Yeah, we are. Okay. We are, because I trust the product so well that I want everybody to discover it and fall in love with it. And in those eco-friendly time, what's better than just going to your backyard, pick a wine you love, and drink this?
Sure. I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Nycci.
All right, up next, I've got Scott, Drewno, and Danny Lee. Okay, so in 2017, Danny Lee and Scott Drewno created the Fried Rice Collective. All their award-winning properties, the Chicos, the Anju, the IEGU, and as I mentioned earlier, I love the event space in the same space as IEGU called the Shell. I mean, it's so cute. Anyway, so how did these two come together? That's kind of the question we want to get to today. So coming up as chefs and restaurateurs in the early aughts and teens, the climate was really exciting. I would love to talk about sort of before that moment when you guys came together. Like, Danny, what was I know your mom had restaurants. Like, how did you get into food and cooking?
Yeah, my mom was always, I guess, in the industry ever since I was born. She had a little deli in Old Town Alexandria that she ran with her best friend. So I remember when I was like 5 and 6, especially summer vacations, I would go with her to work, and I'd be like the local delivery boy, to like the local businesses. But she was also just a phenomenal cook. We always had friends coming over. We'd bring lunch to church or whatever, and everyone always told me like, "Hey, like your mom cooks the best gravy of like all the moms at the church or whatever." And so I think from a very early age, just the imprint of my mother's cooking was just always on me, and that's how I grew up, and that's where I developed my palate. And obviously, with what I specialize in, cooking Korean food, that's where that came in. And then.
But did she teach you? Did you like train at her knee? Like, did
No.
it inspire you at some
Well,
point?
there's some things that I know now, like looking back, definitely helped, like pleating dumplings, like folding mandu. We started doing, when we were like 3.
Sure.
So, instead of like watching TV after dinner, like our family activity was like sitting around the kitchen table, just like folding dumplings.
Oh.
So looking back on that, that was a very invaluable experience because now I can train people how to do that.
Sure.
But then, growing up, as I got older, in high school, college, I always knew that I wanted to get into the restaurant industry as a living.
And how did your mom feel about that? Or your parents? Like, how did they feel?
She was actually very supportive.
Okay.
She got into it almost out of necessity, where I had a choice, right? And I think
because you're first gen.
Yeah. And I did well enough in school, but I think she knew that I never wanted to be like in academia or the doctor.
The birds.
path. Yeah.
They're up there.
Oh, they're birds?
They're birds.
I thought it was David back
I
there. I'm
know,
like, what is
they're
he doing?
birds.
Those are squeaky cheese.
So
We're in
gentle.
a winery.
I was playing
Okay.
like Angry Birds.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought he was doing.
Sorry, keep
Come
going.
on,
So,
please.
yeah, so,
Down over there.
After college, I've had like a office job. I was a paralegal at a big law firm in DC, just to make some money and explore that route. But then I hated it. But there was a restaurant that was right near the office called the Ocean Air, where I knew a lot.
Still
of
there.
I became friends with a lot of people there through some connections to the law firm, and there was a manager there who I became very close with, and who knew that I always wanted to get back into the restaurant industry, and the position opened up. So I left this, pretty decent salary, like full benefits job, to go. I think back then it was like $7.25 an hour, and no benefits, whatever.
Right.
And I told my mom that, and I thought she was gonna be like, "What are you doing?" And she was like, "Do it."
I love that.
And then stayed there for a few years, and moved up the chain pretty quick up there, just due to a bunch of fateful scenarios. I guess we learned a lot there. And then in both front and back of the house. And then my mom's lease was running up at National Airport, and
But she wasn't. It wasn't Korean.
it was Chinese,
It was Chinese.
which oddly enough, like.
Right. I mean, no, the stars aligned here in lots of ways. So what brought you to Mandu, the first Mandu on 18th, where
I was just supposed to
Anju?
consult.
Oh,
So
okay.
My mom's old manager at the airport found this space.
Uh-huh.
Because he was Nepalese, and there was a Nepalese family that owned a restaurant called Mt Everest. That was where the original Mandu space was.
Right.
18th and S. So he told us that family wanted out. So we negotiated a basic buyout of their lease, and negotiated a new lease with the landlord. And in 3 months we opened. And again, I was just supposed to consult because my original plan was to stay with Ocean Air and see where that went.
Okay.
And then my sister took me aside and was like, you have to leave. Like, you got to join forces with Mom. This is our family dream.
But did you see yourself going into the kitchen, or were you like, no, I'm going to be
Initially,
front of
no,
the
because
house?
She was supposed to be, my mom was supposed to be in charge of the kitchen. I was supposed to run the business in front of the house.
Right.
And that was like a terrible idea.
Okay.
So first 6 months of struggle, we got into fights every day. It wasn't until I promoted people in front of the house to basically run that part of the restaurant, and then I joined around in the kitchen.
Right.
And that's where we really fixed a lot of things, expanded the menu, changed a lot of the menu, and that's where we kind of took off.
Because it was, am I incorrect? It was the first Korean
It was the first full-service Korean restaurant
in DC.
There had been Korean restaurants before, but they had like a sushi bar with it.
Right.
Or there were some fast casuals that had a bibimbap. You could also get like steak and cheese.
Right.
So it was DC's first kind of full-service, fully Korean eatery, but it was done in a way where it was still like a neighborhood restaurant before that term really existed in DC.
It was a real neighborhood restaurant. I used to live around the corner
Yeah.
at 18th and T. And then just quickly, you also then opened, like 6 years later, in Mt Vernon.
4.5 years later, we opened up the second Mandu, which is now the only Mandu.
Right.
On 5th and K Street.
Which at that time, I mean,
It's
It's not what it was.
It was all parking.
it wasn't, I don't even, maybe it was called Mt Vernon Triangle. They just celebrated 20 years.
Triangle is what it was called back then.
Was it? Okay, because they just celebrated 20 years, but it's so interesting. All right, I'm going to put a pin in you for a sec.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring in Scott Drewno.
Here we
The
go.
man, the myth, the legend. Okay, so Scott, originally from upstate New York.
Beautiful upstate New York.
Beautiful upstate New York.
From Lake Seneca?
Oh, get out of here with that terrible lake. We're talking Cuca Lake, baby.
I just like saying that word.
Yeah, Cuca.
Cuca.
Yeah.
Let's talk about sort of how you wound up in the kitchen.
Interesting, we're in a winery today. In upstate New York, we have, last count was like 372 wineries.
Mm-hmm.
But I was a kid, there was probably 60. But obviously,
Which is still pretty substantial.
Yeah, but obviously different time of life. And, I started working at a vineyard when I was 10. My father was like, oh, you want a new bike? Go tie some grapes.
Okay.
So, we had friends that had a winery, and so I would work there all the time, pulling brush, tying grapes, just regular farm maintenance. I think for me, my culinary journey really started, and I didn't realize it. And I thought about it last week when we started to put corn on the menu. And I used to be so excited when corn came in upstate New York because it was so delicious, sweet, and there's so many farm stands. And I think I learned about seasonality and how special that is from an early age, being from a farming community where tomatoes started to come in July, corn, and we couldn't have corn on July 4th because it just wasn't ready.
Wasn't ready yet, right?
And every
I
time
grew up in Jersey.
Yes,
I mean, silver corn did not come out until August.
Yeah, exactly. Late July, early August. That's when you're getting it. So I think from an early age, I was imprinted in me about seasonality and when food tastes its best and being local, and so.
And then how did you wind up with Wolfgang Puck?
So again, at that time, there was no Food Network, and there weren't really celebrity chefs, and cooking to my parents was not a career. I'd started working in restaurants, as a dishwasher to start, and I worked at an Applebee's, and I love being in the kitchen. I love the chaos of it, and just everything about being in the kitchen. But my parents were like, not a career, not a career, not a career. Go to school, you're going to figure something out. Maybe you can, go to law school, but you have to get your undergraduate. But after my sophomore year, I decided to drop out of school because I just love working in restaurants. And I had a friend moving to Vegas, so I moved to Las Vegas at the ripe age of 21.
Wow.
And
what could go wrong?
What could go wrong? Exactly. My father was not impressed. Parents weren't thrilled with me at the time. But when I first got there, Wolfgang was just opening Outpost of Chinois, which the original opened in 1981 in Santa Monica. And my lovely wife convinced me to go apply there, even though I didn't think I'd been working at a Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, and I didn't.
Little different.
I didn't think I had the chops, honestly, to work for someone like Wolfgang Puck because.
But I bet it gave you the
more fine dining.
foundations for working for a large restaurant because Ruth Chris turns it out.
Yeah, I always tell people you should work in if you're interested in working in a restaurant before you do anything else, you should work in one, whether it's an Applebee's or a Ruth's Chris or whatever it is. You'll learn fundamentals, you'll learn teamwork, you'll learn the camaraderie, the joys, you'll learn the lows of sauces burning and things spilling and fryers going down in the middle of service. You'll learn the symphony of a restaurant, and you'll learn the chaos of a restaurant in any whether it's a fast food restaurant or a mid-scale restaurant or a chain. It's always good to spend time in there. And
I think that's excellent advice.
And there's a lot of parallels. Danny and I have been in a lot of restaurants. And you can kind of, whether there's language barriers or not, you can kind of speak the language of the kitchen and be comfortable in the kitchen once you're in there. Because they're all, obviously there's different degrees of, when we're talking super high-end restaurants. But once you're in there, you can really feel it and feel the energy of it.
But I'm sort of curious, given the time frame that you both came up in kitchens, there's been a real cultural shift. The day of yelling, screaming, throwing things, chefs. I know that's been glorified on TV a bit, but we all know sort of the history of those older chefs, in the 70s and 80s.
That's what we were trained in.
Right.
Yeah,
You were trained under that. And so did you guys decide collectively, like, yeah, I don't want to do that? Or were you like, no, let's beat the shit out of people? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, where did you stand when it happened to you, and how did you decide you would be different or not?
I think that was part of for me, it was owning your first restaurant and realizing that like there's no one above you that someone can go to and like you kind of like place the blame on. Right. Everything falls on your shoulders at that point.
Right.
So you have to really think about everything. Like every action you take will have a direct consequence on your livelihood.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's a conversation my mother had with me because I was coming from a situation where, it wasn't as bad as some of the stories you've heard, but it's still, one of those types of businesses and kitchens, which most were at that time.
No, I'm just saying it was the normal.
When we opened up Mandu, my mom, there's, the first few months services were very hectic and it was very stressful. And, I'm not gonna lie, I lost my cool. And my mom would always tell me, she was like, we do not do that. She was like, it was a family restaurant. She was like, I'm not gonna have my son, be that type of like restaurant owner, manager, or chef, or whatever you want to call yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So fortunately for me, it was, we opened up Mandu when I was 25.
Wow.
So, at a pretty young age, especially in my career, I was able to kind of get past that pretty quickly.
Mm. But you heard it.
We still hear it. There's still a lot of chefs that we know.
No. I mean, you heard your mother.
Oh, yeah.
You heard what she said because you could have ignored her.
And she also said, like, hey, like, you appreciate the staff. I was like, yeah. She was like, they're not going to do it tomorrow if you keep on acting like this.
Very smart.
So, and if you look at mine to this day, we still have several employees that have been with us since the original one. So you're going on 18 years.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen.
No.
And so what about with you?
Oh, yeah, so I definitely grew up at a time where,
in Vegas, big ass restaurants, you know what I mean?
Lots of egos,
Sure.
And for me, I was a bit of a wayward kid. I just dropped out of school. I knew I wanted to cook, but I didn't really have a career path or a goal. I just wanted to be in restaurants. So that harsh criticism and demeaning, I responded to it, but that's never been my nature. I've always been a little calmer. Yeah, and there's definitely certain times, like Danny said, there are certain times I definitely should have handled situations better in the past. But I've always been more of the disappointed dad nurturer, I guess, instead of the yelling and cursing sort of leader. But when you're, when I first moved to town, part of the reason Danny and I became good friends was because, Mandu was open late and I would finish work and go there and like kind of de-stress with Danny and talk about like, tough days, because I was, I moved here and I was 30 years old. I was thrust into a situation where it was a $7 million restaurant. There's a lot of partners, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of pressure on someone that's 30 that, is coming into a new city, doesn't know anybody, and you're trying to cook the best food you can, give the best service, make this amazing restaurant. And, quite honestly, like, I don't know if I was necessarily prepared for all that pressure.
Yeah, there was actually, when you put it that way, because it was in the new museum.
Yeah.
A new museum, the museum.
Yeah.
And it was Wolfgang Puck's first entrance into the DC market.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of pressure.
There was a lot of pressure.
I mean, it was blown up.
Yeah, it was hyped up before we got here, but not only that, but Wolfgang also had several partners in the deal that wanted certain things out of it, and like, so I had a lot of bosses at that time, and everybody wanted something different, and then, it was a stressful time that I wouldn't have it the other way, but we definitely.
But at what point did you click? Like, not just you were friends. But at what point were you like, oh, we can do things together? Not the Fried Rice Collective initially, but you guys were on.
He did a noodle dinner.
Oh God, I remember that.
Yeah, where he reached out, like we didn't even have each other's cell numbers at that point. So I called Mandu. And then.
Hi, is Danny there?
I think he left a message. So
is Danny there?
But I know he had been to the bar. I heard he'd been at the bar with some other chefs and stuff. So I was like, hey man, like, I'm like, always heard a lot about you, would love to, fishing, because I'd eaten at the source. And then he's like, oh, we're doing this like noodle dinner with a bunch of guest chefs. And I was like, oh, I love doing, events like that. My mom and I could come and do it. That was the first time we had cooked together or done like a collaboration together along with other chefs. But I think afterwards we took everyone back to Mandu that night, and then that's when we really started hanging out and like getting to know each other. Was that night, and my uncle got him really drunk.
May or may not have thrown up in the bathroom that night.
He's like, that was you?
May or may not have happened. Danny's uncle is, he's, intimidating, and he was like, drink this. I'm like, yes, sir.
It's basically like a Korean boilermaker.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And then from there, since again, it sounds crazy to think because it's not that long ago.
Right.
But there weren't many chefs in DC cooking Asian food. Right?
No, there wasn't.
Who are also kind of like part of the scene.
Yeah.
So anytime there were events, Scott and I would always get paired together for, people like, oh, we both cook Asian food.
Yeah.
Sure.
But we started to really...
Which now sounds really offensive, but go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But we started to really taste each other's food, but also work together a lot. Also travel to different cities and cook there. And then I think that's where something clicked. I do remember something specific is that I was... I was working on... It was one of the guys who now have Long Shot Hospitality.
Yes.
Yeah.
They had a restaurant and bar called Six Engine that was
Right.
in the old firehouse attached to a condo building I used to live in. And they got gifted this gigantic bourbon barrel similar to these, and I brought over a bunch of soy sauce. We just filled it with soy and just let it sit.
Ooh.
And have like a bourbon aged.
That sounds very
soy.
Kyle Bailey.
Yeah.
That was pre-Kyle.
Oh, it wasn't Kyle?
No.
Oh, wow.
Jeremy.
Oh,
So then
that makes sense. Okay.
Once I was ready, I between Six Engine and Mandu, we got these little bottles, and I would just go around the stage just hanging out. But I remember sending Scott a picture of it, and he immediately called me. He's like, "Hey, we should try to do something together, whether it's a market or something. Like we should do something together." And I was like, "I would love to." And then, a couple years went by. He was I could sense he was starting to feel about making some type of move. I wanted something different that was outside of my family's group, the then two Mandus, right? I wanted something that I could be a little bit more flexible, because Mandu was always, we kind of pigeonholed ourselves in doing very traditional home style Korean cooking, which there is a need for a concept like that.
Yeah.
But I wanted to be a little bit more creative and free flowing. At the same time, so did he.
And so instead of just doing a concept together, you created a company together. So did you have an idea with Fried Rice Collective what was coming, or you were like, how did that come together?
Well,
anyone? Somebody?
We started off with the fried rice.
We're still figuring that out.
Okay.
Do we have a company?
We started off with the Fried Rice Collective, and the first restaurant was Chico.
Chico.
Right? But we didn't, because of the size of Chico, physical size, the first one, Capitol Hill.
Tiny on Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
Like 1,000 square feet.
Right.
We knew that as partners, we'd have to do more in order to really make this make sense.
Yeah, from a financial standpoint, you can only make so much money out of 1,000 square feet.
Right, of course. I mean, the math only works so much.
So we kind of built the first Chico to be scalable from the outset. So everything we did, we took, really, honestly, really detailed notes and things that kind of set us up for the future. We're like, hey, the next one we do, we should change this, this, and this.
Well, so let's talk about sort of just quickly, since we're in Chico, concept now, what it looks like for you guys, how you sort of in each market, Bethesda, Cap Hill, you've got a new one opening up, like how you sort of fit those, take your concept, do what you do, but sort of fit it into those neighborhoods.
Well, I think at first we just felt like, let's focus on great food. Let's not, the whole idea behind Chico was, I'd come from the source where we had Bernardo plates that cost $105 a plate. We had, Riedel stemware that's $25 a stem. Like, we had all this stuff and I was at the point where I was like, I really don't want to stress about plateware, glassware, silverware. I want to just focus on making good food. And so we, Danny and I talked about that. We just kind of decided like, hey, let's just make great food. Let's make it, let's test it and see, because we felt at that point people wanted to eat better food at home.
You did have some
with a takeout program in mind.
You were ready for what was coming in the future.
Yeah, obviously the pandemic kind of, allowed us to, I hate to say it, to like flourish in that regard, because we were already kind of set up. We'd already tested containers, and like we spent a lot of time working on the delivery program, because we knew, again, 1,000 square feet, we need alternate stream of revenue. You can't just be in-house guests. So we had already kind of planned on that, and we wanted to expand it. And
I remember when I first went, and you guys, you were like, no, you're going to come up here and order. Yeah. And then you're going to sit down. And I was like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah. So now, because you live in the suburbs, so we and the thing about Danny and I is
no, because I didn't want all the food coming out at once. I wanted to be able to order my appetizers and then order my entrees and then order desserts. Like I wanted my meal coursed. Yeah. And I felt if I had to go up there, I was like, everything's going to come to the table at once. Yes. I don't want to eat that way.
The thing about Danny and I think is one of the good points of our working relationship is that we're amenable to change. And I think a lot of people...
Did you just call me like suburban? Is that where we're going here?
I didn't.
Okay.
Well, too, I think, we're amenable to make changes. And we realize like, hey, sometimes you have to be swift with your changes. And just having the two of us, we have the ability to like be thoughtful about it. I don't know how many times one of us has said the other one, let's sleep on it for the night. And we'll make a decision tomorrow, and we'll make a decision in a few days. Like we're thoughtful about it, but we also can make decisions quickly. And we've realized in the suburbs, like our models are changing, because you suburbanites, you want to have more service, you want to have full liquor program. So, we're excited for Chico Sterling to come on board. Are we talking about this? Yeah. I'm like, it's too late. Yeah,
you've already said it.
No, but
twice.
The model is going to be a little different for Chico and Sterling. We're putting in a full bar. More service with the Chico, so we're pretty excited.
Yeah, we're kind of wrapping our heads around like how. So Chico started off with the idea of fast casual, right? The rise of fast casual. That model is still very viable. Yeah. But what we didn't want, especially with Asian food, a lot of Asian fast casuals follow the Chipotle model, which is
scoop.
So everything's pre-cooked, maybe the day before.
We don't want that.
Held on steam tables just to warm up, and just sits there for hours, and you just scoop.
Scoop and serve.
Green, put a protein on, sauce, and go, right? And we were both adamant that wasn't going to be Chico. We wanted to have a curated menu to remove the options to a point from the guest, right? Because the problem with assembly line also is that if you give a guest too many options, the ultimate product could taste bad, because there's some things that shouldn't be paired together. Yes. Right? But who are they going to blame? They're going to blame the restaurant.
Right.
So we wanted to have a curated menu that we knew were menu items that we could cook very fast. So, but still be served in a fast casual atmosphere where you do order at the counter and food's going to come out when it's ready.
Quickly, right.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
And that's a certain diner. Like for you, you're like, I want it coursed out. Like, Chico is, hey, we're going to make food and we want it to be like served when it's ready, when it's hot. And here it is. We don't want to have to, because when you start to get into the logistics of running restaurants, there's a lot of variables involved in coursing food, getting it to the table at the right time, clearing at the right time. In our model with this, we want it to be casual, but we want the food to be on point. So I want that food to hit your table.
Can we just talk quickly though, because you do have an ability to have a more curated experience.
Yeah, well, at Chico Capitol Hill, we have our kitchen counter.
Right.
Which, we want to have, this sort of funky takeout place, and then do a little more high-end tasting menu. Right. So we do the tasting menu at Chico Capitol Hill.
But it's the only done at Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
Now, will you do something like that in Sterling or no?
I don't.
TBD?
It's not really built to have a kitchen counter. The kitchen is like kind of open, but the bar is in front of it, so there's not like a layout where we'd have a kitchen counter. But
with Sterling though is when we're gonna implement a higher level of service than any other Chico has had.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, so we'll circle back later and see how that
we're
experiment
super
goes.
excited. All new, we're doing some new menu items, and as we always do menu items, but we're going to keep evolving, and it's opening a new restaurant's always energizing,
Sure.
and we love the feel of going in a new kitchen, and we start working on new dishes now, and we're going to open hopefully in November, and we've already started talking about like, hey, what's the next impactful dish we want to add to the menu, and so it's an exciting time for us for sure.
Well, it sounds really exciting. And I want to sort of go to your next property, which took over the original Mandu, which is Anju, which Angel Barretta just won his Rammy the other night, which is very exciting.
Yep.
But I was actually in Mandu the night of the fire.
Wow.
It was during Pride, the big Pride parade. And
Happened on the 4th.
it was on the 4th. We were there, whatever it was. We were there like the night before it happened.
Yeah. Natalie was just like, your phone is going crazy, like something's wrong. And I see who's calling, and it's one of my best friends, but also original manager at the original Mandu, who no longer work for us, but still lived across the street. And I was like, what's up? He said, you have to come down to Mandu right now. I was like, why? He said, because it's burning down. Oh. And I was just delirious. I just hung up. Kept on coming. He's like, I'm serious, come down right now. And I was like, okay. So Natalie and I get in the car, and then we couldn't even get within 2 blocks because they had everything. Well, and we could see the smoke. It wasn't like, flames everywhere. It was just high heat. It ended up being an electrical fire. To this day, they have no idea the exact cause.
Okay.
But that was at 3 a.m, so I'm down watching my original family's restaurant burn down.
Right.
And fire trucks destroying the restaurant out of they got to break the ceiling, all the glass, and hose everything down. I immediately had to contact obviously the insurance company, remediation company, Serpro, who came in to like just board up windows, try to start cleaning. But there's only so much we could do in those hours because July 5th is when we're doing our first friends and family preview for Chico.
Oh my God.
So literally, I called them at like 7 a.m, being like, hey,
I got a problem.
So
it was like 6, and I'm like, bro, I'm up. I'm almost there. I was like, I'm coming. Like, he's like, no, you're fine.
So I finally called my general manager at the time. I don't know, like 7 a.m. I was like, hey, luckily I was up to go golfing. So he immediately turned around, came to the restaurant, gave him some more direction, and I was like, I gotta go home, shower, and then go to Chico to open the restaurant. So we're both at Chico.
This is crazy.
Yeah, we had cutting boards out. I had my phone on speaker dealing with the insurance company, and they were like, we hate to put you through this right now, but this is a necessary question, is whether or not you want us to try to get you as much money as possible and just walk away from the space, or we could probably get more money if you decide to rebuild and reopen in the same space. And again, we were just getting ready to have guests in for the first time at Chico.
Right.
So I had been doing these industry nights at the now current only Mandu called Anju. And that was always an idea like floating around our head. And I looked at Scott and I was like, what if we brought the original Mandu space underneath the Fried Rice Collective umbrella, even though we haven't actually opened up our first restaurant yet.
Right. Let's plan the second one now.
Why don't we do that as Anju, and we could utilize some insurance money for part of the build out and see what we can do. And he was like, if you want to do that, he's like, I think we can do it. And then we tapped Angel, who was one of Scott's sous chefs when he was at the Source, who I'd met through that relationship. And I always realized that Angel had a really deep love and passion for Korean food. So I always had him in the back of my mind for some type of concept. So we reached out to Angel, and he was like, yeah, I'd love to. And then he helped us open up the DuPont Circle Chico as kind of like a staging area to get ready for Anju.
And so, I mean, Anju was really, Chico was well received. It is a mainstay in the DC market. Yeah. But Anju was a real spin on what you were both doing, and it was incredibly well received. Were you surprised at the initial, and continued attention that it gets?
I honestly wasn't surprised at the initial attention we got. I am surprised that we're, in a good way, that we're 5 years in, and it's still one of the hardest reservations to get.
Yeah, because it keeps getting better.
Like, and that is surprising, like a very, we feel very fortunate and like humbled by that. Like it's crazy to me that a restaurant 5 years in may not seem like a lot to people in restaurant life. That is forever.
Yeah.
Right? With the amount of restaurants that also have opened in DC, for us to be as busy as we are there is credit to obviously Angel and Eric and the team. But it's a special place. But when we first opened, again, it took 2 years for
it was a long time
for it to reopen.
Sure.
Right? There's so much history in that space from our family being that first Korean restaurant in the city, building the second Mandu, starting a new company, Fried Rice Collective, opening up Chico, right? Having Natalie, my wife, where I met at the first Mandu, design that restaurant. To have all those elements inside one physical space was, personally for me, like very overwhelming.
I bet.
But it was also very special, and I think that's why it continues to be a very special location. That's why I wasn't surprised in the beginning, because there was a lot of attention. Especially because of what we had done with Chico together. Right. Like, what are they going to do for a full service concept now?
Right.
Yeah.
And that caused a lot of excitement and energy, and our main focus was we can't screw this up.
Yeah.
Right. So we hit the ground running. It was very chaotic the first several months, and then COVID.
Yeah.
Right.
It's been a really special place, I think, from the onset. Like when you're in there, it's like, Natalie having her design it, but having Danny's Aunt Moon's paintings on the walls, and having some of the original wall, like if you go in, it looks like rustic and kind of, like it's like, I don't know, peeling off kind of, but that's the original walls from Mandu when it was in its original state. And having Angel come, who, I hired Angel fresh off an internship, at the Source 7 years prior to that. And like having him, be there as a chef. And, it's just like, there's a lot of wonderful things. And, having Danny's mom there all the time. And it's just like, it
feels well loved.
Yeah.
I think when you're eating there, and you're dealing with
There's
the service there, the hospitality.
Like
Eric is a great example.
There. Like, I hired him. He and I worked together at the Ocean Air.
Okay.
And I hired him to be assistant manager at the K Street Mandu, where that opened in 2011.
Okay.
And then for a while, he was actually the manager managing both Mandus.
But he's just got the hospitality
but you
chip.
can tell,
You know what I mean?
Eric,
Like he's.
You can tell Eric, he just really cares.
Yes.
Like he cares for the restaurant. And it's like that. I think that's what we didn't really talk about it, but I think Danny would agree with me that some of the things I'm most proud of are in our company that we've somehow built, which we did not have a plan.
The company we did not plan to build that we built.
But there's so many people that have been with us along for the ride for so many years.
Right.
Phil, our corporate beverage director, worked for Danny for years before Anju opened, but he's been there since then. Victoria has been our director of operations and our partner.
I love Victoria.
At Chico since we opened. Like there's so many cooks. And
she's a gem.
Our chef at the original Chico, worked at Mandu as the chef, and he's still with us now. He's a regional chef, and there's so many chefs, 5 years, 8 years, 7 years, cooks.
But isn't that amazing?
Cooks. Like that's when we walk into Chico Capitol Hill, if you go there during the daytime, Nancy's been there since the first day. JC's been there since the first day. Omar, we moved Omar to IEGU, but he's been there since the first day. Like we have all these team members that have just, hung around with us for a long time, and that's really, I think, the best part of our company is really the people we're surrounded by.
Well, but it comes from the top, right? I mean, people stay because they're happy in the situation where they are. They can grow, they feel good, they feel safe, they feel secure, and they love what they do. They like the product that they're serving. Yeah. Which I'm going to have to move on to IEGU, which is a total. I mean, the brunch at Anju is one of the best brunches in the city. Yeah. So was that what was inspiring IEGU? Because breakfast, there's been so many people over the years who have been trying to make breakfast a thing in DC. And I think Call Your Mother has got the bagel side, and that is creating some of the breakfast. Because I think most people think of a bagel, I can grab it and go. But you're seeing more and more people not going, they're staying. So what was it about the concept, a breakfast concept, an all-day breakfast concept, really, that appealed to both of you?
Well, I think for me, I'm a little older than Danny, a few years.
Not much.
Not that much.
A lot.
But Danny's been an entrepreneur for a long time. His mother was an entrepreneur. I come from a family that is not entrepreneurs in any way. My parents were like, get a job, go to work, pay your taxes. And I working for Wolfgang for 17 years, I was sort of, have all these ideas, and I've always been writing them down. And one of the things I wanted to do was this like fried egg sandwich place. And I had an idea in my head that was like, fresh sourdough, and we're gonna do these fried egg sandwiches. And Danny will tell you, like, I'm always like, hey, we could do this. Hey, we could do this. Hey, we could do this. And he's a great partner. He's like, we're not doing that. He's like, we need
not
to
today.
Focus. Sometimes we need to focus. But when pandemic hit, there was some tough times, for everybody, obviously in the world, but certainly in the restaurant world. And, I want to do something positive and something to give us something to focus on. That was not just like everything is horrible. So, and I, like I was saying earlier about like what a joy it is to open a restaurant, the creation, the process, the energy of opening something new, and it's so uplifting to me. And so I was like, hey, Danny, I want to do this fried egg thing. And, like everything we do, we kind of worked on it together. And I made him a sandwich. She's like, this is good, but it'd be really good. And we put it on this milk bread.
Right, the Korean milk bread.
And so then we're like, honestly, that was like my only contribution.
Right. Yeah. I know, but it's an important one.
It's huge.
Right?
It's huge. It's the biggest part of it.
Because you know how I feel about the Korean egg bread.
Yeah. And so,
So
we,
good.
like we do everything, we collaborate on that. And then, we started creating relationships and through the pandemic, we're like, hey, how can we support ourselves, give us something positive to focus on, create revenue in a downtime, but also how can we support others? So we're like, hey, we buy the smoked salmon from Ivy City, we buy the sausage from Logan's, like local companies that we were using, Sheila Bakery. We try to also, support ourselves, but support our friends in the industry. And IEGU was born out of the pandemic, and
just as a takeout and delivery concept only Saturday and Sunday.
Right.
Yeah. Just
so then was the space sort of offered to you down the street? Did you see it?
Yeah, so we did it for like,
what was in there before?
It was the original La Placitas, which moved down underneath the bridge.
Okay.
And then Matchbox took it over.
Yeah,
and
thinking that they were going to expand into it.
Oh, I was going to say, because it's not big enough for Matchbox,
they were going to
right?
expand into it. And something happened with that where it didn't happen. And then a restaurant called Mekki took it over. But we were thinking, like, in the pandemic, like, I didn't know if IEGU was ever going to turn into anything. We were just like, hey, let's do it. But we were selling 250 sandwiches every Saturday for takeout, 250 every Sunday. And I was like, everybody tempered themselves. It's going to die off.
That's a lot of sandwiches.
Yeah, I'm like, it's going to die off.
Yeah.
Everybody tempered themselves. 2.5 years later, our landlord that's at Chico Capitol Hill had one of the sandwiches. Finally, after 2.5 years. And he was like, hey, it's a space down the street. You should put this in. And I called Danny. I'm like, hey. And,
and what was your response? I mean, I know it's here now, but like initially, were you like, I don't know if we can make this a thing?
Well, I was skeptical, but then due to the neighborhood, what we saw with the need for breakfast spots, even during the week, not just on the weekends, I thought was the perfect location to do a concept.
I think the first thing he said is, what's the deal? Which normally that's how we do it. People bring us a space. Now we're like, what's the deal?
Right, sure.
Like, we're not going to go and make a bad
Well, and I'm sure people offer you spaces all the time.
Yeah, and like we developed this like kind of spreadsheet now where we can just plug in numbers like with like what the parameters that we like to look for.
Right.
It also works, so we can put in the numbers that they give us with. And then we're like, okay, here's what we think we can do based on this, and it's really simple for us to say yes or no.
Because you can do the math.
Yeah.
Okay, and so was your math right on IEGU?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he was right.
Sorry, maybe I phrased that wrong. Okay.
Yeah, it's been great.
Okay.
No, he's been.
It's exceeded expectations.
Has exceeded expectations.
Exceeded. Yes. Oh my God, I can't believe Scott beat you to the punch on that, Danny Lee. Oh my God.
But it also, IEGU tied in with.
Cracked open a can of.
But I'm bummed.
It tied into our catering company launch. So we'd always been doing catering. Just from my time at the Source, we had a lot of clients that wanted in-house catering, and so we'd always been catering on the side. You know, whether we were doing a Chico Anju menu, or sometimes we were.
But you were catering other things. You were like, "You want me to cook a whole pig? I'll do a whole pig."
Exactly.
Like you always were willing to sort of stretch.
Yeah. So we can cook it all, and we were cooking a lot of townhouses and stuff around Capitol Hill, and I was like,
terrible pie you made me cook that you didn't know how to cook.
Shoe fly pie. Once we did.
It's very sweet.
Oh,
it's syrupy and sweet. Not good. Did you do a bad one?
We did a bad one.
Oh, all right.
So like being a good chef.
They call it shoe fly because it's like syrupy and sweet.
Being a good chef is like being a good baseball player. You know, you make a new dish. The best baseball players in the world strike out 7 out of 10 times.
Okay.
You know, so a lot of times we make a dish.
Are you setting expectations? He's like, I'm setting expectations.
If you were going to order a shoe fly pie from us, I'm going to set a low bar for that. So we can cook. That's our tagline. We can cook anything and everything except
shoe fly pie.
No,
okay.
I don't know what the problem was, but it was my first time making. I didn't even had it, so I was like,
sure.
This is right.
Yeah.
Well, if you haven't had it, it's really hard to know what you're looking for. Texture, taste.
Gross. It's like 90% in the last.
Yes, it is. Right. Totally agree. And then I read that you did a 70s themed dinner with like homemade rice-a-roni and hamburger helper.
Oh, well, I'm sure I have. Yeah.
Okay. I was like, did you really shake and bake chicken? Like you did a whole thing?
We did that. Yeah. So we'll literally do anything the guests ask. Like we do. Someone asked me just this week. They're like, we want to have like a boardwalk themed party. So we want a fry station. We want a pizza station. We're like, yeah, sure.
Corn dog, like you
corn
can do
dog.
that.
So we're gonna do like kind of a fun thing.
And you execute all that out of the IEGU kitchen?
Well, you know, we have a few restaurants, so it's a collective.
It depends. Like, you know, for offsite events, you know, it depends on location and which restaurant we think can handle the production for that. Or if it's in-house, again, like Scott said, and as you said in the beginning, we have the shell. So we're able to utilize that kitchen because it's not the concept of IEGU is not open. Well, on the weekends it's open till 4, but typically only till 3. So
right, so you have the space.
Oh.
When it comes to catering, just so people know, are you able to come with like staff and?
Oh yeah, we're
like you're full service,
fully licensed, full service catering company throughout the DMV. We do, you know, yesterday we did a drop off. Someone wanted pulled pork, mac and cheese, buns, coleslaw. So we're like, yep, sure, we'll do that. So we can really, you know, it's called District Catering. We have a website, contact info, really everything
will be in show notes.
Up. And there's a whole list of stuff that we do on there, you know. But also, if you're like, hey, I want Grandma Betty's coffee cake, here's a recipe, please make it.
Right.
And we make it.
I love that. All right. So I met you both when you were very bright-eyed and talented and skilled, but now, like almost 20 years later.
Is this the quickfire part?
No, not yet. Just wait. Hold your horses. It's my show. Just wait. So given your like knowledge and experience, everything you went through, like we talked about, like, you know, how hard kitchens used to be, how you're changing that in your own image now. What's exciting you about, especially past, like we're after the pandemic, like what's out there right now that's exciting you about the changes in the industry that you're both a part of? But what is exciting you right now? And then we'll do the quick fire. Go ahead, Mr. Lee.
I think it is an emphasis on what we talked about earlier is people, balance, trying to navigate the always tough ratio, right, of profitability and happiness of your employees, but also for yourself, right? As restaurant owners, you know, a lot of the things that happened during COVID, I don't think it was impossible to say these things during the time because it seems self-serving. But looking back on it, I don't think the mental health of business owners was taken into account when, you know, there's so many staff members underneath our purview that we were trying to take care of and make sure we're taken care of. But the amount of effort and work and research and sleepless nights that we had to make sure that our teams were taken care of really took a lot out of us spiritually, mentally, physically, that I think we're also recovering from.
I bet.
So for right now that we are financially, out of it, or out of those times, I think it's kind of trying to look back and like, okay, what's a responsible way for us to continue to grow and expand, but that's not as taxing as we've done it in the past, just so that we can do it responsibly for our own mental and physical health's sake, right?
I think that makes
I
sense.
think for us that's good. And I think as a restaurant industry in general, I think that is something that's being talked about, is taking care of yourself. And if you're good, then you can help more people, right? If you're not good and not positioned to help, then the whole world
Well, that's
suffers.
why, like, when you're on a plane, they tell you to put the
That's
mask
right.
on the kid
Yeah.
first, right?
Yeah. No, it's
Oh,
like
on yourself
put it-
first, right? On yourself first, right? Sorry. Right.
Yeah.
No, I would be dead. Okay, so anyway.
Yeah.
And Scott, for you?
Like you're saying, like pre-pandemic, I love moving to DC. I felt there was a great sense of camaraderie in restaurants, and coming from Manhattan, which was such a big place. And I mean, I remember in Manhattan, I would like the neighborhood restaurant, the restaurant next to us had a rabbit dish, and I went and asked them where they got the rabbit from, and they basically wouldn't tell me. And it was so refreshing to move to DC, and I feel like there was a lot of camaraderie and
Even to this day, the
which
chefs play really nice in the sandbox.
which I think, through the pandemic, we lost some of that mojo just because we were just all trying to survive ourselves
Okay.
and do what's best for our teams. And I honestly feel like now we're starting to come out a little bit more, and like we're starting to get back to, the positives that make DC such a great restaurant community is that we are willing to help each other and work together, and we realize all boats rise together here. And we
It's one of my favorite
of course,
lines.
we're in competition to a point. Of course, I want to be a better cook than the person next to me, but I'm going to work hard to achieve that. But I'm not going to put that person, behind me. I want to uplift them at the same time.
Well, I think you can be competitive.
Yeah, we are,
which
of course.
chefs, I don't know a single chef that isn't competitive. So
Yeah.
I think you can still be competitive, but not wish harm on somebody else, right?
There's a way to be competitive while also embracing each other and trying to uplift each other at the same time. There's a way to be competitive in a very bad and toxic way, which unfortunately happens not just in DC, but across the industry.
Sure.
There's always going to be a few bad actors, but I think we're also, as we're, at least there's so many, again, new restaurants, new chefs,
Sure.
younger chefs, right,
Yeah.
that are trying their best. Where like that's what makes us feel old. Is like we start.
But
seeing
you guys are the
stuff-
OGs now.
I
I mean,
know.
like,
I
but
hate
now,
that though. I hate that.
It's-
But
it's-
but I think it's really nice.
Yeah, but it's like the one thing that we aren't bashful about or that we're proud about is in the early 2000s or mid 2000s, and as we move from there, we would always have chefs from out of town visit DC, right? And then say they visit Scott, you'll take them around. Say they visit me, we take them around everywhere.
Sure.
They would always say, each person would say, I can't believe that you have a community like this with chefs and restaurants in DC. And I was like, what do you mean? They're like, this doesn't happen in New York, LA, Chicago, Boston, San Francisco, right? We don't hang out like this. Like, there'll be little pockets of us, and then we just talk shit about, everyone else, right? Where they were like, you guys, like, and it's not just like 6 of you. There's like
No, it's
there's tens and tens and tens of you.
So nice.
We started that.
You did.
And we were integral with that. That was really important to us, not just to have a social group, but we really leaned on our peers for, hey, how are you charging this for so little on your menu? What conveyor are you using? Let me hand you this number. Instead of being like, oh, that's just for me, right? We'd be like, oh, and, you know what I'll do right now? I'll just do a group text.
Put you together.
Bring you together.
Yeah, because all ships rise.
Yeah.
And to your point earlier about talking about helping other purveyors, like, why wouldn't you want more people to have access? Do you know what I mean? It's important. All right, I have to wrap up the show. So, all right, quick rapid fire. Both.
Wait, so how does this work?
I'm going to ask one question. You're both going to answer.
Both
That's it.
can answer.
Yes. I'm going to give you 3 questions. Okay? The first one is, on your night off, where are you eating?
Fuddruckers.
Okay. Are there any left? Go ahead.
Are there any left, Danny?
There has to be one around here.
He's like, okay.
Elfrida.
What about you?
Elfrida.
Okay,
Oh, that
good
pizza's
one.
good.
Good one. All right. Danny Lee,
Elfrida,
Elfrida.
yeah.
Who would you love to do a collab with that you have not?
Man.
Either of you.
That we haven't done a collab with?
Yeah.
That's not a rapid fire question. is
Sorry.
it?
I don't know.
Local, out of town.
Pick. Is there somebody you're like, we never cooked together and I would love to?
God. That's so hard because you say someone, they're like, well, you didn't ask me.
All right, we'll scrap it. Think of it, get back
Michael
to me.
Solomanoff.
Okay, I like that. You? Danny Lee?
That's insanely hard for me.
You
Okay.
get it.
Okay. Never mind.
I just saw a video on the way out of him making hummus, so I was like, yeah. it'd be
Okay. And last but not least, other than Purple Rain,
Oh my god.
what are you singing for karaoke?
good. You want me to name his?
Yeah. What would?
Wonderwall.
Okay.
What's that other one you do? I mean, he has a large catalog.
He does.
Patience is a new one.
Oh,
Like
Patience.
Guns N' Roses.
Ooh, we're doing a little Guns N' Roses.
Do you remember at Allison's birthday?
Yes.
You know, she's a psychologist and she needs patience.
Yeah.
And he was like, we just need a few more patience. That was the best.
Yes, that was
the
great.
best.
Patience.
Oh,
And
good.
do you do karaoke?
No, I don't
Oh yes,
sing.
he does.
Okay.
Convoy.
No, I don't sing.
What did he
There's
do?
a song called Convoy.
I only sing it once for Danny alone.
Okay. See, I would see you.
That sounds weird.
It does.
We were setting up the machine. He's like, what are you going to sing? I'm like, I'm not singing.
What's the name of the artist?
C.W. McCall.
Have you heard
Who?
of this person?
No.
No one has.
No, I would expect you to do
It's a
something
Canadian
like.
country singer
Okay, that sounds like you.
from the 70s.
I thought you would do like Poison or
Oh, on
like.
Skinny Bop? Want to do a little
Yeah.
Skinny Bop?
I would love to see it.
Okay. All right. To be continued. All right.
Yeah.
Stay right here. I'm going to wrap up. Thank you so much for joining me today. This is Nycci Nellis on Industry Night at the gorgeous Barrel Oak Winery and Brewery. I have been talking with Scott Drewno and Danny Lee. You know them as the Fried Rice Collective, Chico, Anju, IEGU, and the Caterer. Everything you heard here today, you can see. Oh, am I looking at the wrong camera? Okay, thank you. Everything you heard here today, you can see on the list or youwantit.com. And of course, you want to follow me at NYCCI, on all the platforms, but especially on Instagram. And don't forget, the show is now on YouTube. Thanks so much for joining me today and have a delicious week.
Produced by Heartcast Media.